Hello, thanks so much for joining us for She Takes Over Talks, which we are so happy to have as part of Bite Live 2021 this year. My name is Nicola Kemp and I'm Editorial Director of Creative Brief. As we emerge from the coronavirus pandemic, we have a unique opportunity as an industry to build back better. Yet data from PwC reveals that just over a quarter of organisations have clear D&I goals. While we all know a myriad of data points, all point to the way that the pandemic has disproportionately impacted women. Because talent is distributed equally amongst all communities, but opportunities are not. So what are we going to do to create change? We have a brilliant panel here today to delve into the topic of how to move from amplification to action when it comes to driving women's creative careers forward. So thank you so much for joining us today. I have Laura Rogers, she's Global Creative Director at Adam and Eve DDB, Bacola Gary, who is Head of D&I at Adam and Eve DDB, Lucy Kelly, who's Executive Producer at Pulse Films, Chantel King, who's photographer at Studio Pi, and Ben Sharp, Head of Integrated Production at Adam and Eve DDB. So just before we kick off, I'd love to get your view, Laura, just in terms of why She Takes Over has decided to focus on this theme and where you are on this She Takes Over journey.
Great, thanks, Nicola. So She Takes Over is an initiative that was founded in 2019, and our initial mission was to increase the visibility of talented women who are working across directors, photographers, composers, art designers, a number of different creative fields. And we dedicated all of our social channels to elevating the profile of these talented women and made this an industry-wide initiative, inviting other agencies and production companies to do the same. What we found is we have had brilliant success at getting more visibility for great talent. But now that we're coming into our third year, we're very interested in converting visibility into actual measurable results. So it's not just enough, we believe, that we elevate the profile of talented women. We actually want to get them hired. So that is, I think, what we'd love to focus on for She Takes Over going forward and what we'll be talking about today.
That's great. Thank you so much, Laura. And Bacola, I'd love to bring you in here because Laura really touched on that need to kind of really activate change that we can all see and measure. And we know this talent exists. We've very thankfully, hopefully moved beyond that era of we asked all the women to an era of really creating space. But what do you see as the role of agencies in kind of breaking down some of the barriers, real and perceived, and moving towards more accountability? Do you think it's the time for sort of less soft language and more action-focused targets?
No, absolutely. So again, I'm just going to echo, talent absolutely exists. And I really want to emphasize that because as well, I think we've definitely shifted. There's still that potential hesitancy around that, but yeah, absolutely, talent exists. It's absolutely, I think, the time for specific targets in this space, because I think then it gives you a kind of a need to really move, because now there's an accountability. But I also still think we need to check ourselves on what we think talent looks like, because, you know, like I said, as things have definitely shifted, there's an appearance of openness to D&I, but what shows up when it comes to delivery is that there's still that little bit of hesitance left. And that's why, you know, that's why the ongoing learning journey and the education and all of that stuff that sits behind it, the workshops that everyone rolls their eyes at, they all still have a really valid place in just getting people on board and understanding the need for the work. But also, you know, the pace of our industry, which we know is fast, and, you know, I think what's happening is it gets in the way in the forms of excuse, and, you know, we don't have time. So we fall back on what's familiar, and we'll talk about this more later, but, you know, our industry is not going to slow down. You know, things, you know, if anything, we all just need to speed up in terms of thinking about the ways in which we're getting talent in, just working with, being nurturing, allowing them to fail, kind of coming back again and just getting it right. And because it's just about offering talent the same breadth of exploration of their craft, that allowed us, all of us now in these kind of senior influential decision-making positions, that we all got to get there too. So this is where, you know, I think it's about, yeah, if we put those targets in place, it will really help to shift things forward.
Thank you. And Ben, Bukola really excellently articulated like the hesitancy that still exists. What's your view? Do you think sometimes potential progress is failing at the finish line? And how do we engage the unengaged with this issue?
A great question. And I think it's worth saying that there is some amazing progress happening across the industry, but I think a lot of it's happening in pockets. And so there's groups of people who are committed to this, you know, and they're hiring talent, they're converting people onto live paid projects. But so you've got these people who are sort of hyper engaged. They're able to recognize talent, they're championing the individuals, and they're able to sell through those people to all the various stakeholders in any given project. But on the other hand, you've got many people who see the push for more underrepresented voices in our work to be very directly a DE&I initiative. And so they don't necessarily look at it as like pure talent. Hey, this person is great for this job, period. They're sort of qualifying it with something else. So ultimately, that means that even if people get into the bids, and as you say, sort of falling at the finish line, ultimately, when you get to the end, those people aren't necessarily championing those voices. So you end up with quite safe choices, perceived safe choices at the end of the day.
That's really interesting, Ben, and you've really articulated perhaps one of the big themes that we'll get onto in terms of the fact that diversity is such a creative advantage and the difference between risk and perceived risk. And with that talent focus in mind, Chantel, I'd love to bring you in here. Do you think there remains a bit of a gap between the elevation of talent, which is definitely making a lot of progress on that level, but then that talent really getting the opportunity that they deserve?
Yeah, I think there still is sadly a gap, because I've been approached by many people about wanting to champion me and, you know, pushing me forward, but then that hasn't really gone into action. As we've kind of mentioned before, there's been a lot of talk and there's a lot of people making these perceived sort of things to drive things forward, but then there's no actual action in delivering that. And so obviously what I want to hope to get from this is that people understand that actually it is important just to push it forward, but also it affects someone mentally as well, because you can get an email and be like really happy about it, but then you go a bit down slightly because you're like, oh, okay, I haven't really heard anything. And then you're kind of thinking, how are they delivering on their promise to make things happen? Because you get loads of brands saying we're going to be doing this and going to be doing that, but when it actually comes to the crunch, it doesn't really happen.
Thanks so much for sharing that. And it's really so helpful to hear that sort of personal element of it, because if the platforms are elevated and then it's not falling through, that can really have an impact on confidence levels, and also, you know, feel like a little bit of corporate gaslighting at terms. And Lucy, I'd love to bring you in here, because one of the things that's often said, and I know it's a cliche, but that men are hired on potential while women are hired on experience. And that is definitely true with particular clients wanting very specific experience, like, have you made a car ad before? You know, these kinds of things. Do you think that there's still a job to be done in terms of creating the space for this new talent that we all know that we need within the industry?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's always more to be done, and I guess that's why we're here, and we need to be here having these conversations still. I don't like the fact that it's like men being hired on potential and women on experience, but because I think really with emerging talent, which we're talking about, it's all about potential. And certainly when we're signing directors on our roster, we're looking at what the future might hold and what we can do for them as much as they can bring to us. And I think that's what makes working with new talent like so exciting. It's being part of their journey from the start. And it's kind of my job working in a production company, and agencies are keen to embrace it as well, to kind of allow others to see that potential with the talent, and becoming a team with the talent at the helm of it, rather than it's just, you know, what Chantel was saying is how you're alone receiving emails, but when you're not alone and you're a team, kind of maybe it doesn't matter if you don't have the exact commercial on your reel, because you've got it's how you approach your work and the process and the people around you as well.
That's such a great point, Lucy, about the power of like the collaborative, you know, the team behind you, and that really being such a positive force. And Laura, I'd love to bring you in here, because there are clearly a lot of people across the industry who are really, really engaged in this issue, and they really, really want to drive change. But how do we really broaden and build momentum when it comes to widening the lens? I mean, how do we get everyone on board and engage the unengaged?
The first point I wanted to make is around clients, because clients are our biggest allies with this agenda. Some of our biggest successes and our biggest advancements have come because clients are asking for more representation in the work that they produce. So if there are any clients who are listening to this right now, please if this is something you want to see in your work, and of course I know you do, make that viewpoint known to your agencies, because as agencies, ultimately what we want to be doing is making the best possible work for our clients. And if this is so, when we get a direct request from clients, that only empowers us to bring back talent that actually fulfills that request. And the other thing is, I think as creatives, even if you're not getting a specific request from your client, you're still responsible for producing the best, most distinctive, most original work. And the way to make work original and distinctive is to use people that are original and distinct themselves. So we're not going to get to that work by always using the same people. So I think it is our responsibility as creatives producing the best work to be constantly challenging ourselves to find new voices, find different people to work with, because that's how we create work that's ownable, distinctive, and stands out for our clients. So, I mean, to me, it comes back to that sort of dual responsibility.
That's so good to hear that there are so many clients as well, really pushing for this, and a real opportunity here. And I want to shift the discussion slightly because, you know, I mentioned at the start, the industry does move incredibly quickly, but maybe not moving quite so quickly when it comes to broadening the lens. So I'd love to discuss some of the structural issues we think that we could really tackle. And with that in mind, Chantal, I'd love to get your view as a photographer. You know, what barriers are creatives facing, and how do we ensure that it's not tokenism? I mean, is there more that we could be doing to really level the playing field?
Yeah, so I think there's still sadly quite a strong barrier that we have to leap over, because as a newer creative, you're kind of competing against all these people with years of experience, and people as well that creatives are used to working with. And sometimes it can be tough coming into something new, and obviously other people like familiar, and that's the problem. It's all about familiarity. And it's kind of, again, it's those creators kind of breaking down and being like, actually, you know what, let's push to have this person in, because as everything, it's a language. Like when you have a creative, you're implying them for their idea. You're sort of you're getting them in for their ideas, but also they have that particular language. And when you have someone else coming in, they'll have a different narrative that could bring something new. Like the others were sort of mentioning, it's all about changing that perception and making different voices being heard. And I think sadly, there's still an issue with tokenism. Sometimes you can feel like the only voice in a room, and it can put a lot of pressure on that one person. And you see it in ads where you're like, oh, how did that kind of skip through the net? Because there haven't been a variety of voices in that room to be like, actually, you know what, I don't think we should really go there, because but then if you don't have that variety of people within that room, that space to be like, actually, you know what, this is not where we should be heading, then that's what will happen. And that's happened quite a few times, which I've noticed.
That's such an important point, and really goes back to the difference between risk and perceived risk. Actually, the bigger risk is not having that diversity in the room, and then not really telling the right stories. I mean, Bacola, I'd love to bring you in here. How can we accelerate the pace of change?
Oh, I'm like, how much time we've got? You know what, in short, say yes more than we say no. I think, is a really short version of the answer. But also, I'm listening to a lot of the answers that people are saying, and there's this thing about new and emerging talent. And I think some of what we have to understand is that for some people, the new and emerging is that I've been, like you said, like Chantal mentioned, she's been in this industry for over 10 years. And so we also have to realize the fatigue that exists within the people that we're targeting, in terms of, I've been trying to break in for a long time, so I don't feel so new. And we have to give the respect to the craft and the craft that they do. And so much of it is actually just about how we change our mindsets and commit these things to consciousness, to be that, it's not, again, let's get out of this sense of it's such a big risk, and like, just say yes, let's say yes to the opportunity. But also think we need to be clear about where and at what point key decisions are made, and by who, and be really transparent about that. Because I think, Ben mentioned earlier, there's so much great work being done, and so many people are really behind this, sponsoring this work. So I think by having that transparency, but what happens is it falls at the point of decision, and everyone kind of goes, well, what do we do next? So I think we need to direct decisions away from what's comfortable, what's familiar, as we've said, and just and use our power as a collective to advocate to do things differently. Change is uncomfortable, but it's necessary. Again, a cliche, but it's the truth. And I think it could be about changing potentially who the decision makers are at times, and allow those who have engaged and invested in building programs like She Takes Over and Fresh Takes, and that live and breathe the craft of what we do, so they really know what's needed. So we need that trust to have the autonomy and the influence to see all of these initiatives convert to hires. And so I think that's kind of really what it's about.
Thank you. I mean, that's such an interesting point as well, in terms of that decision-making element. And Laura, what do you think the role of agencies really is in really being trailblazers for change in this space?
I think if we're going to make change, we have to be willing to question our process. There's so much in the way that we work that is we're quite that is a bit like, what is sacrosanct? Let's have a look at it, and let's maybe break it down and see what we are doing, like what is really serving us, and what is actually just we're doing because it feels comfortable and it's the way we've always done it. Like, for instance, I was having to think about this, and one of the things, I'm Canadian, and one of the things that we do in Canada, when directors, they don't send their treatments over by email. They come in and they present them to the creative team. Now, I mean, there are lots of reasons that we could say that, oh, we don't have time for that. There's a lot of reasons we couldn't do that. But one of the reasons we should, or potentially should, is that actually it lets you speak to that person and find out like what's behind their thinking. And you also get to know a little bit more about like, not just what they would do for the job, but why do they want this job? Are they truly the best person? And it's a really nice way of spending time getting to know the people that you might go ahead and probably spend the next, if it's a big TV ad, like 3 or 4 months with. So that's just an example of one specific thing that we could do differently, that we don't do now, that might lead us to different results, and actually could potentially lead us to more conversion for talent that we might have thought as the underdog. But if they come in and you have a brilliant connection with them in that moment where they're presenting the treatment, then that actually might give them a leg up over the person who is coming in and feels like they might be going through the motions. And that's one example. And I imagine that there are a number of different things within our processes and within our practices that we could question.
Thank you, Laura. I love that idea of just doing things differently. And Ben, I'd love to bring you in here, because could you share with us some of the learnings from Fresh Takes? Because you've really kind of grasped this creative opportunity. Like, what have you learned from that, and what can the industry learn from that?
Yeah, so Fresh Takes is, for anybody who doesn't know, is an internal initiative that essentially says that in any triple bid or any bid situation on a photography or film project, there's going to be at least one director, photographer, animator, illustrator, whatever it is, from an underrepresented background. And that's, I think it's worth saying, heartily groundbreaking as far as instituting something like that. But I think what we've found from doing that is it forces people to look a little deeper. And I think one of the big things that we found, or from talking to production companies over the years, and people don't watch reels. people don't look at portfolios because there's no time. Like there's so much time that's been squeezed out of the process. Once upon it, back when there was 2 weeks in a schedule that you would just look at director reels and you would figure out who is absolutely right for this job. That's been compressed into days. So, but by saying you have to have somebody who you might not have expected to be on this project before, or maybe isn't a big name that you know about, that your boss has worked with, that your clients have worked with, et cetera, it forces you to look a little deeper. And when you look a little deeper, you get skin in the game with that person. You say, okay, I found this person. They're maybe a little rough, or, to Chantal was saying, been doing this for 15 years, and has tons of experience, but just hasn't worked with us before. And so they're new to us. And then you meet them and you have a connection with them, and you work a little harder to give them a little bit more information to, they send in their treatment and you say, there's a few things wrong here, but that meeting was great. And I want to help them come on this journey with us. And then ultimately, by the time, as we were talking about before, by the time you're going over the finish line, they've got a champion, somebody who really wants them to win. And so we've seen that there's been great conversion when we run into those kinds of situations. But obviously there's still tons of work to do. And frankly, we haven't managed to get fresh takes on every single bid. That's a work in progress. And I think we found that the entire sort of program of fresh takes has been a work in progress, and we've been really honest with the agency about that, and with people in our individual departments. And it's had to expand into a bit of an educational platform. We've had to talk about tools. And one of those tools that's been really great is Free to Work. They've got an amazing directory that people can cross-reference with, and you can just find people that you wouldn't necessarily have thought about off the top of your head. They're not necessarily the person who won the Grand Prix at Cannes last year. But I think in this, the overwhelming sort of goal of this is to introduce new voices into our work. Somebody pointed out that when you have 5 different clients shooting 5 different ads, but you send them all through the same director, they're going to start to look the same. And so this is about diversifying ourselves creatively. So it is a DE&I initiative for sure, but really it's a creative initiative, and it's about making the work that much better and distinct.
That's such an interesting point. And I was thinking when you were talking, when we talk about new voices, a lot of the time we're talking about new voices that are new to us, but they've actually been out in the industry for a long time and they've done a lot of different work. And Lucy, I'd love to bring you in here because you have such a pivotal role in this, in terms of the opportunity to widen the lens and really kind of show clients new opportunities, support new directors. Do you feel that there is still a reliance on kind of the big name director and that risk that Ben mentioned as well of sameness? Do you think that there is still perhaps in some corners a belief that a name that's perceived to be new is perceived to be a bigger risk?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, a big name director is a big name for a reason. They've obviously done some brilliant work, but also it gets to the point that they're given the budget and the tools to make that work happen. Yeah, I think, going to I loved what Bakoda said before about, timings are tight, but they're never going to change. So we need to speed up. And I think it's about, getting to know those people and the directors behind the work. Like Laura was saying, like the first thing that we do when we sign a director on the roster, it's like not just the reel. It's like, okay, we're selling the reel. It's who that person is. It's how they work. And the more I get to know that person, the more that we talk about the work that they do, the more confident I am at getting on the phone to someone like Ben or Laura and saying, this person's amazing. They're brilliant. Like I'm in their corner, Pulse is in their corner. And I think that then starts leveling the playing field. And, the more chance we get to have a second conversation about the treatment or hear some feedback about what could be improved, like the kind of more level that playing field does get, which is what, we're all after on these sorts of initiatives and hitting the targets that we've talked about earlier.
That's really interesting. And I think that point about recognizing that the industry isn't going to slow down is such an important one. And it's like, how do we accelerate change within the environment that we're in? And also Lucy's point to budgets, big name director with a big budget, and that making sure that people are having similar opportunities to thrive. And the role of decision makers has really been a key area for change that everyone's identified in different ways. And Chantal, I'd love to bring you in here, because do you think that there is more that those decision makers can do, and that's whether they're at brands, at agencies, or production partners, to better create space?
Yeah, definitely. I think there's definitely been a shift, and I've noticed that there's been more growth with getting new talent on board and redefining that change. But yeah, I think definitely more still could be done, because as noted before, it's all about the actions. And, you know, also, as Lucy pointed out, it's all about the budget. So you can do this amazing work, but then obviously when you're working to a limited budget, there's so much you can do. And it's kind of being behind that corner and amplifying that, so that, you know, you can help grow that person, and then, you know, you're kind of growing together, and then, you know, creating something really beautiful. And I think that's what will highlight in this new creativity that is out there, and also this need for new creativity that's out there. And it's also that part of the growth. And I think it's a great partnership, and that's what this is all about, is creating partnerships between creatives, brands, and client.
That's such an interesting point, and it really underlines the fact that brilliant partnerships are often, you know, behind a lot of the best creative work. And Laura, I'd love to bring you in here, because there is quite a lot of innovation happening from all of those different partners. But I'd love to get a view from you as to what innovation you're seeing from brands in this space.
Sure. I mean, I think, yeah, like I was saying earlier, I'm like so here for clients asking for this, because that is such a great momentum. It gives us the push that we need. And, you know, I think it's worth calling out a few that have been brilliant partners with us. Unilever, first of all, has completely overhauled their processes. They're asking for blind bids. They're asking to meet their production talent directly. And Mars is also doing the same on blind bids as well. And I think that like, as we were saying, whether or not blind bids are exactly the right answer to this, what's really important is that these are brands that are investigating the processes, trying something different, and not just expecting the same sort of set of processes to have a different result. The other thing that I think is actually another example is we as an agency work with the IPC, which is the International Paralympic Committee, and we've actually just finished a production with Lucy and Pulse as well. And one of the things that Pulse did with us, and was in collaboration with the IPC, was to work with C Talent, who are a disability consultation service. And they were able to work with us every step of the way throughout the production in order to make sure that the voices from the community that we were representing were actually represented authentically in the work. So I think this is another good point. If you don't have the expertise, get the expertise. It's out there. C Talent, we're an amazing partner. They worked with us from script development through to practices and processes on set to make sure everything was accessible, to making sure that we were using the right language when we were talking about the work afterwards. So I think the thing is, if you don't actually have the expertise in the room, try and figure out how you can get it, because in this case, that was available, and C Talent were a brilliant partner, and I think made our work better because we were being authentic in how we were representing the people we were working with.
That's such a great point from We the 15 in terms of that, the power of actually having the right people to have that authenticity. We talk about authenticity, and actually a lot in marketing, and often the best way to get that is having that authenticity as well behind the lens. And with that in mind, Bukola, I'd love to bring you in here, because the decision-making element, those decision makers may not always represent all communities. But what would you do in terms of accountability at a decision-making level, and to ensure that accountability is in every stage of the creative process? Because we know everything moves very quickly. And if you don't perhaps have that expert partner in place, that's sometimes where things can go wrong.
Absolutely. And I think, first of all, as well, it's about remembering that, when we talk about diverse talent, new talent, emerging talent, we're talking about people, we're talking about creatives, we're talking about individuals that, we're talking about Bukola, Chantal, Laura, we're talking about Lisa, we're talking about people with ideas, skills, opinions, experiences, creativity who want to work in a major industry. So sometimes you have to say to yourself, it's not new. It's nothing new. It's nothing new. And they have so much value to add, and we have so much value to add. So I think some of it's actually just, let's humanize this moment for a second, because I think, you know, Ben made a point about this work being in this kind of weird D&I space, in terms of it's a D&I initiative and it sits far away, but it's not. It's about the work. It's about the creativity. And so, you know, from an accountability point of view, it's bringing people back into, this is about the work, and us continuing to use creativity as a platform to create, tell incredible stories, nuanced stories, authentic stories. So it's not about compromising the creative process. It's making it equitable and fair, you know. And so decisions should not be heavy and weighted. It's an opportunity, not a risk. And it's taken on that mindset that stops it being tick boxing. And instead it's kind of, you know, it's just about the way it should always be, and how we want to create that work together. So from an accountability point of view, it's just, it's shifting. I think it's again, I've talked about this a lot, but shifting mindset to what the actual ask is, if that makes sense.
That totally makes sense. And Ben, I'd love to bring you in here on that creative side of things as well, because, you know, the campaign, the We the 15 work, I mean, this approach is a competitive advantage creatively. You know, it creates brilliant work. I mean, do you think that there is more that could be done to get decision makers to understand the creative value of diversity?
Absolutely. I think the way people evaluate creativity and the way people evaluate the talent behind that is a very objective evaluation. And so, you know, obviously very visibly people use awards and award shows and, you know, historical things that those directors, those photographers have done. But ultimately, if you look at any great director, there was a moment in their career where they were in the middle, and then they made something, and that one thing made everything that they made before it irrelevant, and now that was the thing that represents them. And so, you know, I think there needs to be a shift of perception in this, where it's, as agencies, we should want to be the people who make the thing that changes that person's career and makes them that A-list in-demand director. And, you know, like when we hire talent, like we're not hiring them. When you find somebody who's new to you, you look at the work they've done, you look at who they are, and you think about, well, who have they worked with before? You know, like we hire directors because other great agencies have found them first. You know, we don't exist in isolation. So using, you know, more industry-wide resources, not thinking about this kind of talent hunt as being a competitive advantage internally, and actually sharing. So, you know, it's kind of, you know, to your question about like the competitive advantage of it all, it's about pairing the right talent with the right script at the right moment for their career and for our clients and for the work that we're making.
Thank you so much, Ben. It's so interesting to think it in the concept of like the creative breakthrough on an individual and human level as well. And Lucy, I'd love to bring you in here, because you've really talked about the role of creative collaboration, that, you know, a really experienced, brilliant producer and a director that maybe doesn't have the same level of experience can really be a big winning combination. Do you think that there's more that can be done on a collective level? And going back to Ben's point that it's not always the industry in direct competition with everyone, it's kind of raising the bar just across the industry to really create the conditions to get more people to thrive, really, and to have that breakthrough moment that Ben talked about.
Yeah, I think, you know, there are like changes to our processes that we could do. And from a production point of view, I think often once a job's been awarded to a director, it becomes a very closed process. So emerging talent who perhaps haven't worked on many commercials before don't get to be a part of that. And I think if we opened up like shadowing directors for more junior talent earlier on, so, you know, they could witness another director presenting to a client or talking through their storyboards or those sorts of things, it becomes more normal to them. Like, I think a director has talent, but they don't necessarily know how to voice that talent to clients because they haven't done it before. So seeing other people doing that could really help. And the other thing that when we chatted the other day that Laura mentioned was about constructive feedback on treatments. And I loved that, because if you've got, you know, talent that perhaps hasn't done an ad before, but they had a really good idea and maybe they didn't get across the line, but someone's taking the time to explain why and what they want to see next time, then it's worth the pitch. It's worth the week of work and the late nights doing that pitch, because you've learned something from it. And yeah, kind of encouraging agencies and creatives to take the time to do that would be really helpful for us.
That's such a great point as well, in terms of the feedback point, because to Chantel's point earlier, sometimes if there's a lot of amplification, but then it doesn't translate to the work, that can really negatively impact confidence as well. And Laura, I'd love to get your view here, because, you know, she takes over, you know, everyone here is clearly really engaged with this challenge and really wanting to get on board. But we can't ignore the fact that not everyone is seeing this as the number one priority. And how do we really kind of get that in all stages of the process? How do we get those people on board? Because something like feedback, it takes time. And to Bacola's point about how quickly the industry moves, that feedback could be transformational to someone's career. So how do we create the culture where we can get everyone engaged with that?
Yeah, I mean, the feedback thing I think is really important. And to your question earlier, that is actually something that one of our clients asked for. It's part of our, you know, our Unilever, one of our clients is actually mandating that we provide feedback to our production partners who don't get the job. So total, like, actual credit to them for even suggesting that and noticing that that's something that could help, so that even when talent don't get the job this time, that every experience of bidding for a job becomes something that is constructive, that it doesn't become like bid after bid after bid where you just get discouraged and you don't know why. So that actually the times where you don't win the job, you still win something because you learn from it. So I think that creating that kind of a culture where we don't see it necessarily as every bid it's a competition between three people, but it's an opportunity to get to know three people better. Because I mean, I don't know, in my experience, sometimes you might not go with somebody for one thing, but you get to know them a little bit better. And then the next time something comes up that might be more right for them, you already kind of know how they work, you know how they think, you're more likely to work with them next time. And also within the agency, often if a talent doesn't get something on one bid, they'll look within the creative department, you'll say, well, so-and-so wrote a great treatment for me on this. Maybe you should approach them on that. And then they start to get like into the agency. So I think that we need to stop thinking of a triple bid as a pure competition. These are opportunities to get to know three people better. And then I think the other thing, and this is, I guess, back to our approach with Fresh Takes, we have to stop thinking about this strictly as a D&I initiative. This is a creativity initiative with a D&I benefit. We are always trying to make better work. We want our work to be original and distinct, and that means working with different people. So I think it's a shift of a mindset. It's about thinking of diversity as a way into better creative, not just diversity for diversity's sake.
Thank you so much. And I was thinking the kind of mandated feedback element, I mean, that just improves the experience for everyone and creates more kind of mutual respect as well. And Chantel, I'd love to get your view here from a talent perspective as well. Do you think there is too much responsibility on talent, or do you think it's becoming more of a collective, equitable industry?
Yeah, I think sometimes there is quite a responsibility on talent on the creative, because you know you're competing against all these people, and then you want to do the best, and you're doing all the things that you need to do. Like I always post behind the scenes on my Instagram as well, so people can kind of see me working. So I'm doing all these little sneaky things to try and get into people's mindset, to know that, you know, I do know what I'm doing, and I've been in the industry for a long time, and I can definitely amplify that. But then I think it's still that pressure to try and be be better than you are, which I think sometimes actually can probably be good because it pushes you more. If anything, it makes you want to be better. You'd be like, hey, actually, you know what, I've done this, but how can I push myself even further? So it kind of has that little double-edged sword in a way, where in one section you might be like, actually, this might be quite a lot on me to do, but then in another extent, you're like, actually, this pushes me to be better. But then it's for the client to see that. What you want is that all of the hard work and all that process that you're putting into making yourself stronger is being seen, and those people are giving you the opportunity, as Nicola rightly said, that it's about opportunity, not all about risk.
And thank you for kind of mentioning that pressure, because there is, you know, these are highly pressurized situations. People are investing a lot of time and energy and, you know, and emotion into the process. And one of the things from a She Takes Over perspective, in terms of getting everyone to take a chunk of that pressure off, I'd love to get your view, Ben, and you are not our token man on this She Takes Over panel, because a lot of this change will not happen if only, you know, half the world is in the room. But how can men take a chunk of this pressure and help to create more change?
Well, I think it's kind of three things. It's acknowledge your bias. You know, we all want to work with our heroes, but actually you got to put new people on, and you got to look outside of that. Acknowledge the advantages that we've had that maybe don't come from skill, but come from, you know, gender, and really take the time to watch the work. You know, if you really look at the work and you see, hey, this person's got something in there, and it might not have been the thing that won the Grand Prix last year, but it's there's something in that work that makes you go, oh, I'm curious what would happen if this person did X, Y, or Z. You know, follow that. You know, follow your gut with that, and give them the space to come in and talk to you.
Thank you. And with that investing of time, you know, that's such a powerful lever for change in a lot of ways, and understanding. Lucy, I'd love to get a view from a production perspective. How do you, you know, sometimes engage partners that may be unwilling to consider some of the people that you're championing?
Well, actually, I mean, I would say that a lot of our partners, particularly in agencies, do, you know, they are really open, and they do really push us, you know, like Laura was saying about the clients motivate them, like the agencies motivate us. And it's really gives us a lot of confidence to know when we're signing new talent that our partners are going to be excited to see who we've signed, and like, you know, try and get them kind of up for jobs and things. So we are really lucky with a lot of our partners. I think if for people who aren't willing to kind of change, I don't think you can tell people what to do, but I think you can empower them with action. And a lot of times it's, you know, we make it really clear that it's an essential part of our decision-making process from the very start. Like often we put it in treatments at pitch stage, you know, this is what we want to do. It's not just about the idea, but it's about who we're going to work with, whether it's female talent or underrepresented talent, but it's also the crew behind the lens. Like we will be promoting heads of department that, you know, are traditionally male dominated roles, and try and get like more diverse talent there too. So I think it is just about sort of your action and bringing people on that journey with you, and making them part of that decision, not just sort of telling them that they're doing it wrong or you're disappointed by their decisions.
That's such a great insight. Thank you, Lucy. And Bacola, what would be your view on kind of the key actions to it sounds like there's a lot of positive things happening, and a really sort of virtuous circle of everyone pushing each other to do more and prioritize this. But what would you do about engaging people who maybe don't see this as a priority, or aren't quite sure how to go about it, if that makes sense?
I think there's two different spaces there, because I think not knowing how to go about it is fine, in a sense of that there's an open door. There's an open door there. There's an opportunity. You know, we're you know, Ben talked about sharing, the importance of sharing, and kind of not seeing this as a competitive advantage necessarily, but actually let's kind of share our best practice, our learnings across the industry, across agencies, because the more people that are doing this, the less unfamiliar it becomes. And we know weirdly, even though we're creatives and we're in a creative industry, familiarity is something we hold on to. So anything that we can do to make this risky, like new stuff familiar, that we should be doing that. So for those who are kind of, where do I start? I'm like, let's get on the phone, let's have conversations, let's meet, let's do that bit. So I think that bit we can absolutely deal with. There's potential there. But on the side of people that are just hesitant for the sake of, you know, is this all going to blow over? Is this D&I stuff going to end? And and I think it's because a lot of it is about that they're seeing it as just a D&I thing, and they're reducing it to just a D&I thing, and that they're still not understanding how this translates to the work. You know, I speak a lot when so in the agency, I always talk about how everything that we do has to link back to the work, because that's what ultimately we're here to do. We chose to work in this industry for the craft of what it is. We didn't choose to work in this industry to necessarily be kind of particular activists or advocacies in particular cases, or we're not trying to push just our own lived experiences forward. This is about the work. And so I think with that in mind, if you've got people that are really just hesitant in that space, I think you can have some really honest and upfront conversations and say, well, why not? You know, help me understand why not. Let's not kind of settle with the, okay, cool, we'll just drive with 50% of our energy around this and hopefully everyone else will jump on. No, let's go. Let's look back and say, well, what is it that's stopping you, or what is it that's holding back? Let's really understand and interrogate what those challenges are for you, because the points of entry for this work may be different reasons in terms of why. I think some of it could also link to people feeling like their role in the space that they hold is potentially being challenged. And, you know, and I know there's sadly a lot of negative rhetoric around kind of how D&I is influencing our industry in the wrong way, because people are making very quick decisions where people are feeling like misplaced and displaced, and it's getting lost. The focus of what we're trying to do is getting lost and muddled in that space. And so I think it's about, let's be honest about what is it that you're hesitant about, because we see nothing but opportunity. We see nothing but change and creativity and what that can lead to. And I think the more case studies we get around that, the more we can back that up with examples. And I think, you know, Laura mentioned a lot of the work that we're doing is that we have so many great case studies now to prove that this stuff works, that this is not just an initiative that gets people at talent in at this end and kind of doesn't take them anywhere. We're able to really show how this is creating great, meaningful, impactful work that is award winning, that is kind of calling people to stand up and say, oh, who's that talent? And we're only going to continue to head in that direction, because even awards and the program and infrastructure around awards will start to ask and seek out the kind of, how are you showing representation authentically and things like that. And so we're just essentially it's going that direction anyway. So if you don't jump on now, you just become last and actually leave yourself open to potentially being exposed. And so I say, let's jump on board.
Thank you. And that's such a great reminder as well, that no one gets into the industry to make really mediocre work. You know, that's not the dream, is it, for anybody? And this is just such a part of this process of creating the best work, you know, of creating work that makes you really proud, like we are the Undefeatables, and having those moments of joy within all the speed of everything. Is really, really important. So we're almost out of time, but I'd love it if you would all leave our audience with something to take to fuel that non-mediocre work that everyone wants to make. I'd love to just get a view, you know, if you could just leave the audience with one thing to take away as to how to move from amplification to action, what would that be? And Lucy, I'm going to put you on the spot and start with you, if that's okay.
I'm quite glad, because I was thinking, I was like, I'm probably going to say something that everyone's already said. So I'm glad I got to get in first. But I think it's like, make yourself accountable and do the work and take the time to look at the talent. And if it means something to you, do it, you know, in your spare time, make it part of your decisions every step of the way.
Thank you. And Chantal, what would your takeaway be?
Yeah, I think it's definitely about just taking the time to really look at new talent out there. There's so many amazing talent out there, and, you know, they're getting washed over by this people that's already been there. But I think, you know, I know it's all about time, but then you can still give maybe like half an hour out of your week, just be like, I'm going to dedicate this time, put it in my schedule, put it in your calendar, be like, okay, this is my time to look at new talent. and just, you know, look at those databases that loads of people are putting together and be like, actually, I'm going to look at like 10 people each week and then collate them and find people that I really like and put them, make like a little wish list of people that you want to contact. And then, you know, make another list of, okay, every other week I'm going to contact about 3 of those people, do little meetings, you know, schedule it in. It's all about scheduling it in and making time for that.
That's such great advice. Thank you, Chantel. And Ben, what would be your advice?
I think for any producers out there, younger producers especially, you know, like ask questions and ask why things are done the way that they're done. And when you see things that you feel like are being done just because they've always been done, ask if there's a better way. And that, you know, talent is one thing. There's lots of things where you can question those things, but specifically, obviously, when it comes to talent, ask why are we using the same people that we always use, and challenge people to find new options.
Thank you. And Bacola, what would your advice be?
So to any decision makers, I think it's about being generous with your time, being generous with, and remember how you got to where you got to. You had the investment, you've had the platform and time and opportunity to craft your skill, to grow and develop, fail, get it right, get it wrong, and that's how you've got to where you've got to. So recognize the importance of nurturing talent and giving people a chance and opportunity, not expecting excellence on day one, and knowing that excellence comes. It just takes one opportunity for it to go from, to Ben's point before about not knowing to being completely discovered. So I think to all decision makers, be really generous with the platform and the position you hold, because that's where change is going to happen at the point of decision.
That's great advice. Thank you. And Laura, what would be your advice to the audience?
Oh, I'm going last. Okay. Well, my advice is let's break free from the arm's length formalized treatment process. Let's treat every time we have because this is when we have a job, this is actually the time where it is the most important, where our attention is focused on finding the right person for the job. So let's treat that as an opportunity to get to know people, ask them questions. Every person, you should leave that process knowing those 3 or maybe 4 or 5 people better. And after that, at the end, give feedback. So I'm going to commit to giving feedback. I'm saying that right now, and I'm saying this in front of both Ben and Lucy, who I expect you to hold me accountable to that. So everyone out there as well, let's try and commit to that as well, because I think it's a way that we can actually make a difference in terms of not just seeing great talent, but actually hiring them.
Thank you so much. I think that's such a great way to end the panel. I think in different ways, all of your advice really had a commonality in terms of the investment of time. You know, people want to make the best work they can. People do want to make a difference, and they are invested in that. And also it has a massively positive impact on the creative culture, because if creativity is a muscle, you want to exercise that muscle every day. So to Chantel's point of taking that time, of scheduling it in, looking at the work and widening the lens can only be a good thing. So thank you all so much for tuning in, and thank you so much to the She Takes Over crew and Adam and Eve DDB for partnering with us on this event today. Thank you very much.